There he is again. Got him that time. There he goes. Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. We are fishing the Chattahoochee River drainage. The Chattahoochee bass, the shoal bass, and the largemouth bass are the only native black bass. I've done a few videos from this drainage already, so you may already know that if you watch those videos. If not, the Alabama bass was introduced. They were first documented by biologists in 1970 in the Chattahoochee River arm of Lake Lanier, and they have since colonized just about every tributary. Well, they have colonized every tributary flowing into and out of Lake Lanier. The only thing that has stopped them is where you have like a natural barrier like a waterfall or some kind of man-made barrier like a dam, a mill dam. And even with those barriers, sometimes they bring fish home from the lake and they dump them in their backyard, which just so happens to, be on one of these streams. So that's how these fish get, non-native species get above these barriers. People catch them and take them home in a live well and they just dump them in their backyard, which is illegal, but they either don't know or don't care about that, or the consequences, which are basically forever. The biologists don't have the time or money to fix all the illegal introductions, and those illegal introductions wipe out the native species. So if you've never heard of or seen a Chattahoochee bass, that's probably why. Certainly habitat loss from dams played a big role in their decline, but the few remaining fragmented populations that were still around are being wiped out by people moving these fish around. They've been around for a few million years, and just in the last 50 years they've been wiped out pretty much. Now that was definitely a fish, and it was probably the target species, which happens to be the Chattahoochee bass. I have found that with a really small Chattahoochee bass, around 6 inches, they have trouble getting the shaky head in their mouth. I catch a lot more. I have a higher hookup percentage with a Texas rig, or that's been my experience. And I may switch over to a Texas rig if this fish doesn't come back. There he is again. Got him that time. It's not a Chattahoochee bass. It's an Alabama bass. Wow, hooked him in the eye, which is... Now, I don't normally release non-native. It's been so long. Let me tilt the camera so you can see him. Boy, this fish, I don't know if you can see that. He's got a mark here, and then if you turn him over, he's got one here. So that fish was in the jaws of something quite large. Or that's my take on it. When you see that and that, something pretty big chomped on him. And again, we've got what I'm fishing here. There's just a back eddy right here. There's a Roly-Poly Bama bass. I thought I had my camera on, but I had to retrieve my lure and I turned it off, and I did not turn the camera back on for the cast and hook set, unfortunately. Now this appears to be an Alabama bass, and he's 16 or 17 inches, but he's got some spots right there in the anal fin. I don't know I always say this, I don't know if you can see that, but if you were to run the genetics on this fish, you'd probably find some Chattahoochee genetics in him. But it's also that's a melanistic spot right there. It's it's called bass blotch, I think is another name for it, but it's just a form of melanism, and it can be caused by several things. You know, it can be something in the environment, it can be something in the diet, it can be genetic, or it can be, you know, maybe a combination of all those things. Biologists don't really know, and without testing the water here in this fish, I mean, it's impossible to say what is the cause of that, but it's a form of melanism, and it's just pigment that is localized for some reason, and they don't really know what causes that, like I said. But anyway, this is a really nice or chunky non-native Alabama bass, because, you know, these are native to the Mobile Basin. That's the Coosa, Tallapoosa, Cahaba, and the Warrior drainage, and the Tombigbee. We're in the Chattahoochee drainage, so these are non-native. A lot of people don't know that. They think they call them spotted bass still, but they were split in 2008 from the spotted bass. You know, the spotted bass is more closely related to smallmouth. They're both native to the Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio drainage system, and the Alabama bass is more closely related to red-eye bass from the Coosa drainage, actually. But anyway, that's a chunky fish, and I've held him out of the water long enough. I normally don't release non-native species, but because we are, like I said, upstream from a giant man-made impoundment that is just full of these, I'm gonna release this fish. Another interesting thing I want to point out is that when the water starts to get cold, and this water is cold, it's in the 40s, probably mid to upper 40s here. You see these spots kind of, the spots on the lateral stripe here, they kind of coalesce into a solid stripe. You see that a lot in cold water, even with the largemouth. A lot of times those blotches will just coalesce into a solid stripe. It's really interesting. But again, you mostly see that in cold water with the Alabama and largemouth bass. There he goes. One other thing I want to show everyone while we're here is this is a big back eddy. And when I say back eddy, obviously that's the river's right there, but the current actually swings back around and travels upstream here along the bank, or it used to. That no longer happens now because of all this silt and this sediment that accumulates over here. And the reason there's so much sediment here is because they've built a lot of houses. There's just been a lot of construction up and down the river, really, but upstream. And what happens when people build a house on a stream, obviously they want to see the creek or the river, so they cut down all the trees in their backyard so they can watch the stream. Well, they watch the stream, all right. They watch the stream eat their $1 million property because those trees prevent erosion, basically the root systems. And when you cut them all down, you just have crazy, out of control erosion. And this is the result of that erosion. This hole, or this back eddy, that you know, where I'm standing now, you can see all this silt. It used to be deep, like right here. If I walk over here, you can see over here, it hasn't filled in yet, but it's in the process of filling in. Eventually this will be gone as well, and it'll extend all the way to the bank there. But you know, this is just silt, sand, clay. Oh, there's something you don't find every day. Somebody's key fob. Got the old panic button on there. It's a Jeep key fob. Maybe there's a whole Jeep out there. One other thing I want to point out while I'm here on this fishing this back eddy is you can see which way the grass is bent. It's actually bent upstream, as are all of the plants growing here. And if we look up in the mountain laurel here, you can see all this wood debris. It's up in these trees, you know, higher than I am tall, and that's significant, or that tells us that this eddy, this back eddy that I've been fishing, is here at when the river is extremely high. Like during a big rain event, we have a flood. This back eddy here that I've been fishing, this is a refuge, a winter refuge, or a fall winter refuge, if you will, for all of the not just black bass, but really all kinds of fish will use this as a refuge when the water is up. And we know this refuge is still here, obviously, by a lot of people could probably tell by the landscape and the geology of the rocks. But if that wasn't obvious enough, you've got this wood debris here in the trees, and all the vegetation is bent upstream. So we know this is a pretty good winter hole, and this is the kind of thing you want to look for. There's a bite right there. That's our first shoal bass. Not a big one by any means. On the Texas rig. He's got some of those melanistic spots on his caudal fin there, right there on the lower lobe, fin lobe. This one has red eyes, so it's probably a male. That's triggered by water temperature, I think, in my opinion. But you see that a lot around the spawn. A lot of the males, not just shoal bass, all different species of black bass, the males around the spawn will have red eyes. It's a pretty common thing. Where's a bald eagle right there? I just got a bite right there. That feels like a red breast or something. Stay hooked. Now it's an Alabama bass. He's probably going to be gut hooked because I didn't set the hook right away. No, he's not gut hooked. Now that looks like a cold water fish. He's got those yellow eyes. And there are some faint spots there in the anal fin, so this is most likely some Chattahoochee Alabama hybrid. Even though superficially it does look like an Alabama bass. See ya. Well, I didn't think it was going to happen. I had given up and I was paddling back to my truck, and I made one Hail Mary before going down this big shoal with the old shaky head, and I caught the fish I was after, the old Chattahoochee bass. This one was about 9 inches, not a giant, but they're every year. These things, the real ones, are increasingly harder to find, and I was really glad to see this one. They're very hard to catch when the water's cold like this, late in the year anyway. They are for me, unless you have access to private water. They're real, and this is not private water, this is public. Anyway, very glad to have this Chattahoochee bass. I never fish private water unless, well, I shouldn't say that, but I don't have access to private water. If someone were to invite me, I would of course go, but I don't fish. None of my videos will ever be on private water. There she goes. Thanks. Oh, so now all the Chattahoochee bass are going to start biting. That's how it's going to be. I guess all the Chattahoochee bass are going to start biting now. Boy, look at the spiny dorsal tips. Man, they've even got some coloration on there. That's awesome. The old Chattahoochee bass. That's got to be my favorite bass right there. Maybe my favorite fish of all time. If it's a real one, and I think it is, of course genetics are the only way to determine that, and I am not taking a fin clip, so I will just have to assume or guess that this is a Chattahoochee bass. Just under 10 inches, I guess, if I were to close the mouth and get a proper measurement. Trying to get a thumbnail pick with the red fins there. Okay, buddy. Really appreciate it. Not much light left. It's getting dark. See ya. Anyway, the fish was right over there against that, well, it gets kind of deep between me and the bank there, and the fish was just kind of in that, the bend, this channel bend right here. I think it's maybe 5 feet over there, 5 feet deep maybe.